Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you've joined from. I'm Gaurav, and I welcome you to the 74th episode of this Unboxing AI webinar series. Uh, a brief about Carpal.ai. At Carpal, we simplify the adoption of AI in radiology workflows using the clinical tech platform that we have, which offers a lot more than just being the world's largest AI marketplace. Uh, we look at your processes. We look at scheduling, protocoling, acquisition, interpretation, and reporting, and give you the right AI for your clinical workflows, making it easy. Enough about us. Today we have a very special guest. We have Dr. Pawan Sinha joining us from MIT today, from Boston today. Uh, I'll give a quick introduction of Dr. Pawan Sinha to everyone here. Dr. Pawan Sinha is the professor of vision and computational neuroscience in the Department of Brain and Cognitive Sciences at MIT. He received his undergraduate degree in computer science from the reputed and prestigious, not far from here in Delhi, the Indian Institute of Technology, New Delhi, and his master's and doctoral degrees from the Department of Computer Science at MIT. He's also studied at University of California, Berkeley for the first year of his graduate studies. His work has been focused on understanding how how human brain learns to recognize objects through visual experience, and also how it encodes the data in memory. The key initiative in that front is Project Prakash, which we will talk about a lot today. But what it accomplishes is the twin goals of providing treatment to children with disabilities and also understanding mechanisms of learning and plasticity in the brain. Some of the awards that he has received throughout his career, the first one is Pissart Vision Award, the Picasso, the highest US government award for the young scientists. He has also received John Merck Scholars Award for Research and the Distinguished Alumnus Award from the ID Delhi. He's very humble in his capabilities and incapabilities as well. He doesn't know how to drive. He doesn't know how to swim. He doesn't know how to play a musical instruments. But still, going to the Himalayas, going to the base camp of Everest, he's done that all, and that's another part of him. So we welcome you, Dr. Pawan Sinha, to the webinar
Thank
today.
you, Gaurav. Thank you, Gaurav. It's a pleasure to join you for this conversation.
Perfect. So let's get started, Dr. Sinha. We are very proud of your work in Project Prakash. Tell us more about that, and also tell us about how radiology imaging has helped you in that project.
Yes, and thank you again, Gaurav, and thank you to all of the people joining for this call. Um, so I am deeply passionate about the mission that Project Prakash stands for, and it's very appropriate that we are having this conversation on the Carpal AI platform because the Mahajan family has been uh, a key part of Project Prakash, and I'll describe how that came to be. But Project Prakash, in a nutshell, is an effort that attempts to combine two missions. One is a humanitarian mission, and the other is a scientific one. The humanitarian mission uh, is very relevant to the Indian landscape. It has to do with providing treatment to children who have been born blind but are actually treatable. So many of these children, because they are born in remote rural parts of the country, they can't access medical care, or their parents don't have the financial wherewithal to help their children get treatment. And these children, as you might imagine, lead very difficult lives because of their blindness. So the humanitarian mission of Project Prakash is to find these children and bring them to major surgical centers.
Mhm.
Say, we've been focusing on Delhi so far, bring them to New Delhi, provide them world-class surgeries, completely free of cost. So the child transitions from darkness, from blindness, to a world of sight quite abruptly in a matter of, quite literally, 30 minutes. A child goes from blindness to sight. And As you might imagine, that transition is transformative for the child's life and for the child's family's life. But in that transition are also the opportunities for doing some remarkable science, for understanding what are the initial stages of brain development and visual learning. And by having access to that kind of information, we begin to get an understanding of perhaps one of the most important questions in neuroscience, and that is, what are the limits on brain plasticity as a function of age? And what might be the algorithms that the brain uses in order to begin to make sense of this very complex sensory information that it's begun to receive. Um, so it's been a really remarkable experience for all of us on the Prakash team to be able to do good science, science that was simply uh, impossible to do any other way, and also to immediately see the impact of our work on real lives. Uh, so that's roughly Project Prakash. The way the Mahajan family, Dr. Harsh Mahajan and Vidur and Kabir uh, and Dr. Ritu Mahajan, the way they have all contributed to Prakash is a very significant one. Fairly soon after we started Project Prakash, we realized that besides doing behavioral work with the newly sighted children, it would also be very interesting and very informative if we could see what are the changes happening in the brain as a function of time after surgery. And
Mhm.
of course, in order to do that, we would need to do neuroimaging. Uh, and at that time, there weren't very many options for functional neuroimaging in India. I reached out to Dr. Harsh Mahajan, and he immediately welcomed us with open arms. And we have, from that point on, it's been over 15 years now, from that point on, all of the imaging that we have done with the Prakash children has been at the Mahajan imaging centers. And the results that have come out have been really quite remarkable, directly demonstrating the capacity of the brain, even at a fairly advanced age, to be able to change. So, going quite counter to the ideas that had become dogmas in the field of neuroscience that past the first few years of life, the brain simply won't have the plasticity in order to adapt to information from the eyes. With the neuroimaging evidence that we gathered at the margin imaging centers, we have been able to directly challenge that assumption. And we've been able to see how the brain changes, how rapidly it changes with the onset of sight. And with that result, we are now in a very good position to ask fine-grained questions of which regions in the brain, which aspects of their activity undergo changes as a function of the kinds of tasks that the child is learning. So it opens up a whole rich set of questions that would have been impossible to address any other way. So let me pause there. That's roughly Project Prakash and how we have used neuroimaging.
Oh no, that's great. And when we were talking about this webinar, Vidhu told me that how Project Prakash has a direct impact to humanity by empowering those children so that their life is transformed and as you mentioned, transition in transformation. Uh, Dr. Sinha, I want to understand that learning starts in the womb and ends in the tomb now. So does this quote really make sense? At one end, we are saying that the brain becomes plastic at a particular age, right? But on the other hand, we are saying this. Let's say if I'm 37 years old and if I want to acquire a new skill, so my learning, will it just be limited to the core senses, or
Mhm.
can I acquire, let's say, public speaking as a skill at an age of 37?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Gaurav. And it connects to an idea that, uh, well, it's a very powerful idea, but it's sometimes been misinterpreted. So this is the idea of critical periods in development. Uh, Famously, David Hubel and Torsten Wiesel, two remarkable neuroscientists at Hopkins and then later at Harvard, they studied uh, the ability of the animal brain. They were mostly working with kittens, the ability of the kitten brain to change as a function of visual experience at different time points in life. And what they noticed was that in the first few months of life, the brain exhibited significant plasticity. So any kind of deprivation that the kitten went through would have an impact on the brain. But the same kind of deprivations later on in life, say when the kitten is an adult cat, would not change brain structure, brain physiology too much. That led to the idea that maybe there are these critical windows early on in life when experience can leave a very strong impression in the brain.
Hmm.
But when we age, the brain becomes much less plastic. That idea has been extrapolated, say, in the context of the kind of children that we are working with, um, to to have a fairly pessimistic outlook in terms of what surgery can accomplish. The
Hmm.
notion that a child past the age of 6 or 7 years simply won't benefit from the correction of the eyes because the brain would not be plastic enough to respond to that correction. What we are finding is that there's only partial truth to that pessimism.
Hmm.
Uh, the children in Prakash do indeed have some lasting impairments. For instance, the clarity of their vision never
Hmm.
comes all the way up to 20/20 vision. They typically always have significantly poorer than normal clarity. But the remarkable thing is that even with this reduced quality of front end input, the brain is able to learn a tremendous amount about the world. So, uh, even with this somewhat blurry input, the brain is able to learn to do object recognition, face recognition,
Hmm.
visually guided navigation, and such. And that connects to the question you asked, Gaurav, that contrary to the dogma that there simply won't be any significant visual learning past the age of 7 or 8, we are finding that there is pronounced learning even into early adulthood. We
Hmm.
have treated individuals in their 20s, and we find that even there's very significant learning. This is making us adopt a very different viewpoint, and that links to your from the womb to the tomb quote. So the perspective that we are taking is that instead of thinking of plasticity of the brain as a time limited resource, that we start out with a lot of plasticity and then it just kind of declines over the first few years. The perspective we are bringing to this is maybe plasticity is an on demand resource. So when an individual is immersed in an environment that's requiring him or her to learn new things, the brain has mechanisms to upregulate its plasticity. And this seems like a radical idea, but there's the beginnings of evidence. I mean, certainly the observations in Prakash seem to suggest this, that when a child who has been blind from birth is suddenly put into an environment where there's a lot of new stuff that the brain now has to make sense of, then the brain is able to harness
Hmm.
some resources of plasticity in order to enable the child to learn. We believe that this applies even to the neurotypical, the quote unquote normal individuals.
Okay.
When we place ourselves in an unusual circumstance, in a novel circumstance,
Hmm.
the brain can upregulate its malleability,
Hmm.
and we can begin to learn what the regularities of that new environment are. So to come to your question, can we learn anything at any age? I think our default assumption ought to be yes. Uh, There might be some reductions in our ability to acquire all of the details,
Hmm.
but by and large, the top level answer, I believe, is an affirmative one, that we should never think of age as a limiting factor, as a fundamentally limiting factor that would prevent our acquisition of new skills.
Amazing. Very well said. Great. Like when we talk about neuroscience, Dr. Sinha, brain is at the center. And in the world of artificial intelligence, a model is at the center, and they both have their learning principles. So I'm curious to know that what are common learning principles, and we work with more than 75 AI partners across the globe. So what are your suggestions and
Mhm.
learnings from how brain learns? What can be applied in the learnings of the AI models?
Yeah, so also a fascinating question, Gaurav. And I don't think any of us in the field have a full answer to this question, but there's something that's inescapable when we look at the way humans learn and the way machines learn. One of the big differences is the amount of data that the two systems need. So when you think about how much data has to be put into an AI system's training regimen,
Mm-hmm.
it's immense. I mean, we are talking about, say, for a face recognition system. A few years ago, I had a person from Facebook visit us at MIT, and he was telling us that their system had looked at, I think, 2.4 billion with a B, 2.4 billion different faces in order to get to better than 90% recognition performance. Now, compare that to humans. We become really good at tasks like face recognition, object recognition, with a fraction of that data. I
Oh.
have probably, say, by the time I'm 5 or 6 years old, uh, I would have seen maybe a few thousand people. With just those few thousand people, somehow my brain has acquired really remarkable face recognition skills. So I think what we as a field ought
Mm-hmm.
to try to understand is what are the causes of the great data efficiency
Mm-hmm.
that we possess. And remarkably enough, even with fairly limited amounts of data, the robustness that we exhibit, the
Mm-hmm.
ability to tolerate transformations in images, the ability to tolerate noise and degradations, it's really quite amazing how well humans do. And I'm sure you've seen that uh, in looking at, say, expert radiologists. They are able to look at even somewhat crummy inputs and still be able to tell what might be going on with a given patient. So that's something that we are trying to get our hands around. What accounts for the tremendous human data efficiency and robustness? And one part of the answer, perhaps, lies in development. How humans develop uh, may provide some clues to bringing in the same kinds of efficiencies and robustness to machine vision systems. And what I mean by that, in very broad strokes, is the following. If you look at the progression of
Mm-hmm.
our, say, visual system, the same story perhaps applies to other sensory modalities as well. But if we focus even just on vision, when we are born,
Mm-hmm.
our vision is really quite poor because of the immaturity of the retina, the immaturity of the brain. Uh, we are essentially worse than legally blind at the time we are born, 4 times worse than the definition of legal blindness. And then over the course of the ensuing months, our visual quality improves. Now, this has been thought of as uh, a limitation of biology, that maybe biology is unable to provide us with high quality information right from the outset. Um, but perhaps what might be happening is that biology, instead of being a bottleneck, is actually being very clever in
Hmm.
terms of forcing us to contend with degraded inputs early on in life that then get better and better as time progresses. And in our computational simulations, what we find is that
Hmm.
if you take a deep network and you have it go through the same kind of developmental progression, its performance and data hunger are better than a network that has just only ever seen high quality inputs. So this is just one example of the kind of insight that might translate from studies of humans
Hmm.
to creating
An AI
better
model.
business systems. Yes.
Fascinating. Uh, and of course, this is also the time that we turn to our audience, where if they have any questions, and no question is
Mhm.
a bad question, honestly. You can if you're excited about neuroscience, artificial intelligence, this is the time that you utilize the Q&A functionality on Zoom for your questions. But till that time, I'll go back with another interesting thing that I have in my mind is about the conflict of interest between what brain can do and what an AI model can do. So as we've started
Mm.
utilizing a lot of AI models in our daily work, so what are those things that a brain is better at, and what are those tasks that an AI model is better at, and how is it evolving over a period of time?
Yeah. So one of the so that again is a very rich question, and I think we need to attend to it a lot more. Um we recently were part of an IARPA-led project, the
Mm-hmm.
Intelligence Advanced Research Projects Agency here. Um we were looking at exactly that question. What are the differences in the capabilities of the state-of-the-art machine vision models and humans? And one of the things that we found fairly clearly
Mm-hmm.
is that humans somehow are extremely good at out of distribution performance. So we can look at a bunch of training data and
Mm-hmm.
then be able to extrapolate from that training to instances that we might not have encountered in the training set that's out of distribution performance. Humans are extremely good at that, and especially in the context of degradations and noise. Our
Mm-hmm.
ability to tolerate reductions in input quality, that is just magically amazing. Uh, and machine vision systems, even the transformer-based machine vision systems, they seem to struggle with significant deviations away from the distribution and significant reductions in data quality. So that's one of the core differences that we notice between the two systems.
Thank you, Dr. Sinha. We've got a question from an anonymous attendee here. What advice would you give to researchers trying to find meaning in both scientific discovery and social impact?
Hmm. That's, of course, a huge question. I mean, I still try to think about that, and I think one piece of advice that I would have, just introspecting uh, at my trajectory, is that the thing that helped me the most
Hmm.
is keeping an open mind towards, or in, yeah, an open mind towards big questions. So it would be very easy for a student, for a young researcher, to get sucked in to a problem that looks very interesting, that's very well defined, and to devote all of one's time to
Hmm.
that. And that there's certainly something to be said for having that kind of focus and that discipline to devote your attention to a problem. But it should not come at the expense of also having a sense of what are the big problems in the world beyond the problem that I'm tackling. So one has to balance
Hmm.
the devotion to one specific problem and an understanding of the big problems that impact the world. And one very practical way of doing that is by looking at things like the reports that the UN puts out. Currently, the UN is focused on what it calls the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. These are 17 big goals that were defined in 2015 and that
Mhm.
was supposed to be accomplished by 2030. And we're nowhere close to accomplishing those sustainable development goals, whether they be in education or poverty or sanitation and so on. So even just reading the UN reports about these goals, I think
Mhm.
it gives one a sense of what are the big challenges in the world that I could potentially apply my learning and my life towards. And this is especially important for young students. This is certainly the message that we try to give to the students at MIT,
Mhm.
that it's not just sufficient to be good at signal processing or calculus or thermodynamics. It's also important that you understand how the world works and what's not working in the world, and then think about how the tools and techniques that you're learning at a place like MIT can actually be used in the service of
Got
those
it.
big goals.
Time to rapid fire now. Do you think AI will ever understand context the way human brain does when seeing an object? Can be a short one-line answer.
Yes, I would think that if we discover some of the core principles of how we analyze visual information, I don't see
Mhm.
any fundamental reasons why machine vision systems ought not to be able to do the same thing.
Perfect. There's another question. How much of a brain have we mapped and how well, maybe in percentage, do we understand its functioning?
That's a difficult question. So, I mean, we have mapped the entire brain with neuroimaging. We get information from the entire brain, but it's entirely different to say that we understand the functioning of the entire brain. I would say we are still, despite many decades of work in neuroscience, we have gotten some insights about the initial stages of brain function, but we are still far away from a comprehensive understanding of how the brain works, what the core principles are.
Great. There's another question from Tanish, and it's an interesting one. Brain has evolved through billions of years of trial and error, survival
Mhm.
hacks. Why do we
Mhm.
assume AI's back propagation is superior when it might be a brittle shortcut that crumbles under right real-world ambiguity, like a brain's dopamine-driven exploration? Why do we even compare that?
Yes, so a fair question. The brain certainly has had many hundreds of millions of years, if not more, of time. But we shouldn't be intimidated by that long history of evolution because it may be the case that there are a few core principles of brain function, which, if we were to understand, we would then be able to recreate or come close to recreating the kinds of capabilities the brain has. I'll just give a very simple analogy. So, birds have had, again, hundreds of millions of years of time to make their flying very efficient. We did not need uh, that much time in order to create our own flying systems. All that we needed to do was to understand Bernoulli's principle. And once we had that, then we could figure out how to go about making really impressive flying machines. So, along the same lines, if we were to understand what are the core principles of brain function, then even with a very short amount of time, we will be able to hopefully create intelligent systems.
Perfect. One last, we're on time, but whether I wanted to really understand that what human values cannot be copied by an AI model.
Yes, so that gets into philosophical grounds as to would machines ever have an internal world. So at the moment, I would say none of the human subjective experiences or the sense of emotion or affection or anger or fear, none of that can really be captured by machine-based systems. But that's not to say that it will never be captured. We don't understand what confers these kinds of sentiments to us, or these kinds of values to us, after all, we are just a collection of about 80 billion neurons. So is it the case that when machine-based systems approach this level of complexity, and they're already getting close, that they won't also begin to develop the same kind of richness of internal experience? That may well happen. So I don't want to say that machines will never be able to have the same
Hmm.
kind of emotion,
Got
sentiments,
it.
values that we have. Yeah.
We generally end on time. So thanks everyone for joining in. Thank you, Dr. Sinha, for joining us today. Those were insightful questions and a lot of learnings back home. See you
Uh,
next Thursday, everyone. Thanks for joining again.
Thank you very much, Gaurav. Thank you, everyone.